Hello, I'm Becky Safe. Thanks for checking out my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at synthesizing a snare for drum and bass. So you want a high impact, full-bodied, full of character snare drum for drum and bass, where snares are so important as the kick drum. The timestamps to this video are below in the description, so you can skip back and forth to your favorite section. But let's get into it. So the first thing you want to create is your fundamental root note frequency of your drum, and this generally will match the key of your track. I'm going to choose F, as F minor is the most popular key in drum and bass, and I'm going to open up Serum, but you can do this in pretty much most VSTs, like Vital, for example. You can create this as it is a very basic technique. We're going to be using a sine wave, so come down to analog BD sine, and then just turn it off of random so that it doesn't randomly generate from a different position every time you trigger it, and then bring the phase up to the point where the peak of the waveform is the furthest away from the zero crossing, the line of no sound, basically, so that when it does hit, it's going to have a high impact because it's got the most volume on that wave. Another thing to do is to bring your attack to 0 so that you're getting the most out of the transient impact of this sound. The next thing you want to do is create a pitch drop. So if you think about drums, when you hit a drum, you're transferring the energy from your arm to the drum. And then what that does is it transfers that energy to the listener, but it dissipates over time. So this creates a pitch drop. So the energy drops over time. So we want to replicate that using a envelope on the coarse pitch. We're going to come to LFO1, just bring it over to the left and create a drop shape. Bring it onto envelope mode and take it off of BPM, and then drag LFO1 up to the coarse pitch and stick it on unidirectional mode, and then just drag the crosshair down. So you're now attenuating that pitch drop. Let's play it. So it's a little bit fast at the moment, so let's bring the rate down. Okay, so let's layer this now with some noise. We're going to come over to the noise oscillator, and we're going to use the same envelope to attenuate the level of our noise. Let's change this to bright white. And just attenuate the envelope again. Now, just to further add an attack to this sound, we're going to use LFO2. We're going to create a sharper slope this time, and then stick it on envelope mode and take it off of BPM again, and drag your LFO up to the level of your sine wave. Bring the volume down, increase the crosshair amount, and change the shape. And then bring the rate down. So you can hear there we've got a definitive tonal frequency of our snare drum with a little bit of layering on top and some additional envelopes for the transients. So let's just check that with span. We're going to drag span onto the Serum track, and let's just see what this creates in the spectral analyzer. We have a fundamental with some noise on top, but we also have some frequencies below that fundamental, which we don't want, because that's going to create muddiness once all the other different instruments start to congregate in that area. So let's come onto Serum, and we're going to add an EQ8, and let's high pass so that we're just removing all of the low frequencies and we're only isolating everything from the fundamental. You could also saturate this and push up the harmonics a little bit more so that it brings more into the picture. I'm going to use Trash 2 and literally just shape it so that it pushes it up. So you can now see that those extra harmonics, especially in that middle bit between the highs and the fundamental, are getting pushed up a little bit more, and you're getting that rounder sound on your snare drum. On top of the fundamental, you want to add more harmonics, either with an acoustic snare sample, so you could get a sample pack and just grab an acoustic snare or a live snare that you've recorded, or you can use something like Addictive Drums, which is what I have here, and you can grab a snare sound from there and layer that on top top of the fundamental which we've created via Serum. So let's open Addictive Drums. I'm going to find a snare. So on the MIDI note here, let's just cycle through. Okay, let's go with that one, and let's turn off the response and just increase the pitch so that it starts to match the frequency of your fundamental. But we're not going to use the fundamental of the Addictive Drums sample. We're just going to take those upper harmonics, those extra characteristics of the drum. We'll use span so we can just see where this is sitting. So we can probably bring this up in pitch. And then let's shape it with the pitch envelope. So this is going to create that pitch drop and a little bit of a knock, a transient on there as well. And let's just shorten the sound with the volume envelope. Another great thing about Addictive Drums is not only can you shape it with the pitch and the volume envelope, but you can also do some EQ and distortion and saturation within the plugin itself. So you can really start to hone in and shape that sound within Addictive Drums. Okay, that's starting to sound really sharp and snappy now. We want that for drum and bass because we want those snares to be short, but high impact and full of character. Now let's add an EQ because we've got this to the key of the fundamental, but we don't want the fundamental frequency in this drum. We want to high pass this and bring this up to around just below 1K. And now let's see what they sound like together. And obviously with snare synthesis, you're going to need to go back and forth between the different sounds just so that they start to sound cohesive and working in partnership with each other. I like these now. I think they sound good. I'm going to go back onto Addictive Drums, and because it's more characterful and noise, it's just adding extra on top of our fundamental. We can start to play around with things like erosion and saturation as well, so that it really starts to bring up that upper frequency character. Let's just solo this track by itself. Lovely. We've got the fundamental, which is synthesized. We've got the acoustic character, which is making it sound a bit more real. And now let's add the noise layer. So this is replicating the metal parts underneath the drum. You know, when you hit a snare drum, there's metal that rattles underneath. Well, let's add the noise using a noise oscillator. So we're going to go into operator and let's go down to noise white. And then the envelope, you want it to slope in a little bit because we want this to be sounding after everything else has sounded. It's kind of the extra flair that rings out from the drum after the time it takes from you hitting it to the body of the drum to then the noise rattling underneath. So let's just listen to this. It's a bit low at the moment, so let's just pitch this up. About here, I'd say. Just change it to a high pass filter so that you're cutting off the low frequencies. So we have our noise. Now we can just post-process this. So EQ8 again, high passing so that it's missing that fundamental frequency. Let's do a high shelf so it boosts the upper frequencies. And then we'll get a saturator and we'll drive that up. We'll add some erosion and also let's use a chorus as well. That's our noise layer. Let's see what they sound like together. So we've got the fundamental, we have the character, and now we have the noise of the drum. We need the transient. So the transient you can actually generate using anything really. You could use Kick 2, you could use Addictive Drums, you can get a short sample, you can even take operator and get something really short. All you need is a short sound, something with a fast attack that is just going to create that high energy impact at the start of your sound. At the moment, I'm sure you can hear, even though we've attenuated the envelopes on these sounds, we haven't really got a fast attack. Kick 2 is a sine wave generator, obviously most commonly used to make kicks, as it's called, Kick 2, but you can use all of the parameters in here because it is literally just sine waves. You can use the parameters like the pitch drops and the envelopes and the length to create a short, sharp attack sound. So let's just drag this MIDI down so that we have some MIDI data to work with, and I'm just going to solo the track. Okay, so there we have our transient sound. It doesn't really sound like much at the moment, but in the post-processing, we can start to distort and clip that so that it really starts to push up to the upper limit, so the upper extremities. So let's get trash 2 on this again. We're gonna just push up the harmonics a little bit. And then we can do some clipping. So I'm going to use JST clip. And we can actually bring a transient shaper before the clipper so that we can just really start to hone in on the transient there. Cool, so that's starting to sound like the crack, you know, when you hit the snare drum with the stick, that first impact, high energy sound, the most energy of the drum. That is what this transient is. And we need that in drum and bass so that it punches through in the mix. And the final component of the snare drum, although you can do this at a later stage, is to add your reverb tail. I'm going to go back to the Addictive Drums, the acoustic sample sound, and I'm going to use this to create our reverb tail. We'll use Valhalla Room, so I'm going to just drag that and drop that onto the Addictive Drums patch, and then I'm going to find a snare, small wood room, and just bring the decay down a little bit and the depth. So now you have that reverb tail on just the acoustic part of your drum. In order to separate this from our Addictive Drums channel, because we don't want to have this on the channel, what we can do is we can freeze the track, create a new audio track, and just drag down the sound so it now has the reverb tail on there, and we can go back to Addictive Drums, unfreeze that, and delete the Valhalla Room from our acoustic channel. And the next stage of this is to start to piece all of these parts together. Now, I'm going to freeze and flatten the rest of the tracks so that we have audio to work with. That way it's going to be a lot more precise and everything is not going to clash and run over the top of each other, because all of these parts now need to be pieced together so that they work with each other rather than competing with each other. Okay, so now all of the tracks have been frozen and flattened, and you can see all of the individual components that we have that make up the snare drum. Let me just play it for you so you can hear it. And if we actually remove the transient from the drum, you can hear the difference in how it lulls on the attack. We just lose that attack that we really need in drum and bass. So let's re-add the transient into the mix and let's just zoom in. So you can see here how the transient is that first impact on our drum, but it's actually, if you look up here, competing with these frequencies here. So we want to make sure that we fade in on our fundamental so that it doesn't clash with the transient. Now let's play it. And we can even shorten the transient so that it's not tailing over that main fundamental body of the sound. And actually, all of the other sounds don't have that attack at the beginning, which is actually what we want. You want to make sure that nothing apart from your transient is at the beginning. So Addictive Drums, this is the acoustic part. And then we also have the reverb tail, which we could probably fade in just a little bit. And I'm going to increase the volume of this because it wasn't coming through as much in the mix. Now let's play it. So you can hear that reverb tail, and here's a noise as well, which we can probably just tidy up a little bit as well. I feel like the transient is a little bit low actually, so I'm just going to pitch this up. So you can hear there that it matches the key, the frequencies of all of the other pieces in the jigsaw of the drum. Okay, and finally you want to group and process the group. So select all and group together, and this is obviously our snare. And on the snare, you want to add a high pass filter first, as we don't want the competing frequencies in the lower end because that's going to create muddiness, and the snare doesn't exist below 200-ish hertz. So we don't want anything below there. Next thing we can do is grab a saturator so that we're pushing up on the drive. A transient shaper, so the kilohertz transient shaper I really like. Just bring down the sustain, increase the attack and the pump. So we're getting that really short, sharp drum and bass snare. Love it. The transient shaper is great. The next thing you can do is you can clip this. So we're going to use JST clip. You can just use any clipper, soft clipper, just so that you're really pushing up the upper limits of the frequencies. And I'm actually going to go back in and just shorten this fundamental as I feel like it's a little bit long. And then finally you want to compress, so I'm going to use Pro C2. And just make sure you don't have a fast attack because you don't want to chop off the transient at the beginning of the sound. Bring the ratio down a little bit and the threshold. And that is the fundamental anatomy of building a snare drum for drum and bass. And you can actually use these techniques if you're a producer in electronic music or other music, as it is basically the anatomy of the snare drum. So make sure you have the fundamental, you have the character on top, which you can also use Foley as well if you want to change the characteristics of your snare. So if you've recorded some found sounds, I have sounds of me breaking some glass, and breaking glass would sound really nice over the top of a snare drum, as it adds extra character on top of the Addictive Drums, which I've used in here today. So we've got fundamental, character, we've got transient, and we have the reverb tail as well. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you got something out of it, please consider giving it a like. Drop a comment in the comment section below to let me know what you thought. It helps to boost the YouTube algorithm as well, so that helps to help me to help you. So if you would like to see more content from me, drop a comment and hit the subscribe button. Yeah. All right, guys, I will see you for another video. Bye.